Hey, welcome to the channel. We hope that you enjoy today's stories and check out the chapters on the video to see all the stories for today. But before we get into this video, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to get notified when we release a new video. So let's get into the video. What's the creepiest thing you've ever witnessed?
Experience 1. When I was about 12, I was sleeping on my trampoline with a friend and we heard the bushes move behind us and flashed our flashlight to the bushes and a mountain lion was laying there stalking us. I have never ran so fast in my life. Experience 2. My brother after his overdose. Dude looked like a translucent bluish red color, covered in his own puke, jaw tensed shut. My dad and I thought he was dead, but we worked on him anyway. Pretty sure I chipped some of his teeth prying his mouth open. I cleared his airway. Me and my dad traded compressions until he sent me outside to flag down the ambulance. And that freaking goober survived. He's been sober from hard substances for 7+ years, sober from drinking for 5+. 2 beautiful daughters and a wife. Experience 3. When I was serving my time as an engineer in the Merchant Navy, we used to have to clean out what is called sea chests. They're basically big filters for seawater that we would pump in to use as coolant, and if the pumps were on when we were dockside, we'd find all sorts of things like bottles, fish, crabs, etc. One day we opened up the chest, pulled out the filter, and immediately saw this gold shiny thing which turned out to be a Rolex watch. Usually, we just dump out the filter, but with the mitigating circumstances, we went through it thoroughly and found a piece of a shirt with cufflinks still attached and last, but not least a nicely rotted finger. The police ended up closing off the dock and dredging it, but never found anything in the end. Experience 4. Was working in a restaurant. Nice place. That night we held a charity dinner for a youth in need type of house. The guy representing the house, a worker there, was such a nice and kind man. Every teen there was only saying nice things to him. A good soul that was giving everything he could for these teens. At one point they gave a big check to the charity. I must guess an amount they rarely received. Well, under the excitement, that poor man had a cardiac arrest. Dropped there on the stage, check in hand. He couldn't be brought back. He died. Seeing this was already bad enough, but the kids everywhere in the restaurant screaming and crying for hours after. Haunting. Experience 5. One random night in middle school I woke up and had the odd feeling that something or someone was present in the house and coming towards my room. I was scared, so I closed my eyes to pretend to be asleep. I could faintly hear something come into my room and it felt like someone was standing over me, looking to make sure I was asleep. I laid on my back, eyes shut, until the feeling passed, and ended up falling asleep. I woke up in the morning to find out that our house was robbed. Experience 6. Well-dressed 50-something business dude on a quiet Chicago Elf train reading a Wall Street Journal. Pretty woman with long curly hair dozing in the seat in front of him, her hair dangling behind the seat. The guy is rubbing and playing with her hair while reading his paper, so I figure she's his wife or girlfriend who just wanted some space to nap. He is now intently rubbing and fondling her hair and not reading anymore. Suddenly she snaps awake and pulls in her hair like a bug was in it or something. She gets off at the next stop. He continues reading. They didn't know each other at all. Experience 7. I was in a restaurant years ago on lunch break. At the time I was a very thin 25-year-old woman. There was this big creepy guy sitting there who would not stop staring at me from the moment I walked in the door. I mean, just open-faced staring without blinking for the entire 15 minutes I was eating several seats away. I asked for a box and left early to get away from him. As I walked out, he said, "You shouldn't be out alone. Someone's going to grab you and steal you away." 100% convinced Creepazoid had someone locked up in his basement. Experience 8. I had a scene straight out of a horror movie play out for me a couple of years ago. I was sitting out back with my friend when I see my neighbor in his house. We meet eyes. I wave, he waves. Only one problem, that wasn't my neighbor. I tell my friend we got to go inside now. We turn the lights off and lock the doors. Then I shoot my neighbor a text asking if he has any guests. He says no, so I call the cops, and my neighbor calls as well. The guy was still there when the cops arrived. Apparently, he was dumb enough to think I didn't recognize he wasn't my neighbor. Experience 9. I grew up somewhere very rural, no streetlights, and far away from any town with them. At night it was dark. My bedroom door also never closed properly. You could latch it, but it would pop open if you pushed the door lightly. One night I woke up suddenly, without knowing why. As my mind tried to make sense of things, I looked to my left. Towards the bedroom door, I could see the outline of a figure. In the tiny amount of pre-dawn light, I could just see a white shape, long dark hair hanging down and sunken eyes. I could also hear it breathing. After a few seconds of absolute mind-bending horror, where I literally felt every hair stand on end, it took a step into my room, out of the dark hallway. The hallway had no windows, so my room was slightly lighter. The change of the light also changed the face slightly. I could see it more clearly. I saw that it was in fact my mother's face, and she was sleepwalking. She very occasionally did, and also had a lot of other sleep problems, including very vivid nightmares. She quickly left and went back to bed. Fortunately for my own sanity, I never saw her sleepwalk again. Experience 10. A coworker explained to me when he's in the shower, he uses olive oil on his fingers to lube up his a-hole to prevent colon cancer. The dude was giving me health advice because I was younger than him. When I asked him, "Why would you tell me this?" he said,
I noticed you go to the restroom a lot.
Experience 11. We had a neighbor who moved out and came back a year later for a visit. He brought with him his 2 kids and an Asian woman he claimed was his wife. He claimed it was the same wife he used to have and that she just lost weight and had a makeover. But we remember the wife as a really tiny woman, 5 feet 1 inch or so, with wavy bob hair. This new one was about 5 feet 6 inches with long straight black hair and looked younger too. Even she took off her sandals, and I saw even without sandals she was about 5 feet 6 inches. While on vacation, he told the neighbor of his vacation home that his wife died of a brain tumor. I began to wonder where his wife really was. I think he really just sent her back to her Asian home country. But it was creepy to see him trying to pass off the new one as his wife. Experience 12. When I was probably 15, I went kayaking with some friends. We came across what looked like a log in the water. There were some people on shore that were waving us over, saying someone was probably trapped under the canoe. They used one of our kayaks to go out and look. There was a kid only a few years older than us that had gotten wrapped up in some rope when the canoe turned over. He didn't make it. They found his dad a few days later. Also didn't make it. That image I will never get out of my mind. Experience 13. About 25 years ago, a few days after my cousin's wedding, a large group of us decided to go out drinking one night in Portland, Maine. We decided to walk from my aunt's house to the bar and back so no one would be driving. On the way back from the bar, we cut down a dark residential street, and there was a large guy just standing there holding a hammer. It's like 2 a.m., and there's this large guy just standing in the street holding a hammer. A few of us asked what he was doing as we walked by, but he just stood there watching us as we walked down the street. The guy never said a word. Luckily, there were 12 of us in the group, because who knows what this guy was up to. He gave off some creepy Jason Voorhees vibes, that's for sure.
Do you like listening to these stories? Do you want to hear more of them? Then click that like button, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. And check the description for links to more videos and interesting stories.
Experience 14. I was about 8 and walking in a field along brambles with my grandmother, picking blackberries and generally having a fun time. The area was within walking distance from her home, so it wasn't as if we were anywhere remote. We came across a small area kind of hidden through an archway of bushes. Inside the area and underneath an overhanging tree, really secluded and off of any kind of path, we found a shallow dug rectangle grave shaped with black, burned marks inside on the dirt. I remember my grandmother just saying, "Okay, let's go home," and we went home. Later on, I heard my granddad confirming with my grandmother that it would have been the spot where the guy tried to burn the body of a girl who had been recently murdered in their town. The case had been solved, but the crime scene must have just been left as that hole. It was all over the news just before that, but I was too young to really know about it. I have that photo image of how creepy that hole was to see to this day in my memory. Experience 15. A few months ago, we were at a relative's house. When we were going back home at 2 to 3 a.m., we saw a guy covered head to toe in blood walking, or at least trying to. He started signaling, but we didn't stop because we didn't know what to do. We immediately called the cops and told them what we'd seen. They said to lock the doors and windows and don't stop. Then they kept calling us back asking about the exact location. They called us back over 5 times and they never found him. Edit. A lot of people seemed to think he was in a car crash, but he was exiting a building, or at least it seemed like it. There weren't cars around except parked ones. I should have said that previously, my bad. Experience 16. S-21 in Cambodia and the Killing Fields. The results of genocide which occurred between 1975 and 1980. I visited in the early 2000s. S-21 was the secret center of a network of nearly 200 prisons where people were tortured by the Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot took control of the city and country and ordered anyone with an education or who wore glasses out of the cities and into rice fields, despite having no knowledge of the land. If they couldn't grow crops, they were killed or starved to death. Those that resisted were imprisoned in concentration camps, with S-21 being one of the main ones. It was originally a school, a place of education and peace. It was transformed into a prison of torture. Each classroom was modified to have multiple brick cubicles built inside them, similar to maybe a gym bathroom. Each classroom housed 30 to 40 prisoners. They were not allowed to shower or use the toilet. Once a month, prisoners were hosed down through the windows. There was also a process of choosing to kill an entire family, including children and babies. I forget the term, but basically, it was the idea that if one part of a tree is diseased, it is best to cut the entire tree down, including the roots. There were 30,000 imprisoned at S-21 over the period of Pol Pot's regime. One of many converted school torture camps. Men, women, children, and babies. There was a practice of using babies for target practice. There were photos of this. Of the 30,000 prisoners, there were only 12 survivors. When you visit S-21, you can freely wander around the school grounds, enter the cells, and stand in the torture chambers. You could feel the death and pain from the walls. Just down the road from S-21 is what is known as the Killing Fields. This is where tens of thousands of bodies are buried in mass graves, all of whom went through the torture camps, all who were victims of Pol Pot's regime. I was told buses of people were brought in on a regular basis with those who would be brought here for their execution. You were sent here to your death if you were educated, if you wore glasses, if someone in your family did, if you resisted or refused orders. When Pol Pot was overturned, the locals collected skulls and bones and built towers with them to honor them. Giant shrines of tens of thousands of human skulls and bones are erected there. Parts of the killing fields were still littered with bones and clothing that they wore when executed. You could see patches of dirt that the wind and rain had eroded away, with bones, clothing, and items visible in the dirt. This whole experience was one of the most humbling yet terrifying things I've seen that occurred on this planet, and I still sometimes can't believe these atrocities occurred in my lifetime. Experience 17. In Baghdad almost 20 years ago. I was working alone at night with a busted-up small dozer with one swinging headlight. I would get off from time to time and do shovel work. One time I noticed a bunch of eyes glowing off in the distance, like 5 or 6 sets, just staring at me. I didn't think too much about it and went on to work. After a few minutes, I picked my head up again and noticed the eyes were still there, but closer. I wasn't sure if they were harmless or what, so I continued working but didn't turn my back on them. After a few more minutes, I pick my head up again and they are gone. Sweet, now I don't have to be concerned, I thought. I worked for a few more minutes and looked up and noticed all the eyes again, but they had moved around from the first side and were behind me and close enough that I could now make out what they were in the blackness with the one single swinging dim headlight. They were a pack of feral dogs, looking at me like I would make a good meal. They were standing on a berm I had made, maybe 4 feet high. I grabbed a big dirt clod and charged at them, yelling as I ran and tossed the clod in their direction. They didn't flinch. Oh crap, I thought. So, I get back on the dozer and take off towards them with it. I get closer and start going up the berm, and only then do they start walking briskly away. However, they stopped a short distance away and stared. Luckily, shortly after, another dump truck came by and I got a ride out of there.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you want to see more stories, check out these videos or check the links in the description for more videos. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And ring that notification bell.